learning group is all around taking how do we unlock future skills and how do we actually give our people the right skills to deal with adapt changing behaviors and disruptive mindsets. So as an organization, we actually look at the fact that the future workspace requires 4 different skill types. So no matter what role you're actually in, no matter which part you're playing in, we feel that these are the 4 different kind of skill sets you'd need as a modern work person. First is actually data and AI. Ultimately, regardless of your role, you have to be fluent in data. You have to be able to have a framework to work towards that helps you use data to make data-driven decisions, and that actually you can analyze and understand all the information you're gathering in order to make the best business decisions moving forward. We think that you have to be digitally apt in that actually having increase in digital skills, being able to navigate business environments, being able to navigate through various different applications, looking at how things interact in the digital world, particularly when we start to think about the convergence of IoT data, the Internet of Things, and through business travels as well. You have to have the agile skills. We think that most modern businesses, although there are still lots of good, waterfall practices, I think we ask a lot of agility and ask a lot of right to have just one specialism and being one focus. You have to be agile in being able to be in a team and supporting the objectives of the organization and the objectives of the business moving forward. And then finally, the adaptive skills. So, you have to be able to deal with various different profiles of people in your team, very different profiles of customers and colleagues, and actually be able to work together to drive towards a goal. So that multidisciplinary soft skills is really important as organizations progress. So regardless of what roles there will be or won't be in the future, it will be the employees that are able to kind of work within these four spheres in order to make a company progress and be a happy workforce and a good workforce. So in that, we see that I won't go too much into these details, but ultimately there's details around the fact that loads of businesses understand that the essential skills are actually threatening their growth and that they need these advanced digital skills, but we don't have them. And the main reason through that is the fact that we're not changing the way that we teach and changing the way that we learn in organizations on that basis. So sorry, from that, we say, let's stop the day courses, let's stop the e-learning content and the PowerPoint learning programs. They do have a place. I do think, when you look at some of the other, training providers, Digital Literacy Academy, they're the syllabus, they can take you through it. You can sign off at the end and say that everyone has a certain foundational level of knowledge in data literacy. But realistically, a lot of day courses, people don't actually remember the content after they've been on them. The e-learning content, most people skip and try and get to the video at the end and take the quiz. We've probably all seen it in the InfoSec world. And actually, PowerPoint learning is very boring. It's ironic that I've started this off with PowerPoint, but ironic PowerPoint learning. So for us, we've been looking and working in what is called game-based learning. So this is different to gamification. Gamification is where you reward for certain achievements. Whereas what we're talking about is actually using simulation, using interactivity, and using games to deliver a scenario where we actually learn subconsciously and consciously through the interaction that we have with others. So why game-based learning? It's engaging and memorable. You're more likely to retain your learning.
Yeah, sorry, quick question. And you may be about to come on to this, but I'm going to ask it now because I held my context.
Go for it.
All those areas you showed in the last slide, so data and AI, digital, etc.
Yeah.
Or is it a slide before? Sorry. Do you cover all of these, or is it only? Yeah. Because that to me is more of a digital literacy, a digital program, and we do have other things around that as well. We can talk to a little bit as well, but just a bit of context setting. Is it it digital, or is it just data?
No, so the simulation itself, the gaming simulation is a pathway that we take all of the users through. Now, the coaching that we run alongside of it is what adjusts the training and the learning to what they need to learn. So the games have been developed in order to provide certain scenarios that are fairly, business-like and they represent real life in certain situations. And it's about the trainings, teachings and coachings that we apply with the game learning that then adapts it. So if you wanted it to be purely focused on data and digital, just on data literacy, then the whole coaching module will be focused purely on digital learning. If you wanted the digital piece, if you wanted a teamwork piece, then you can add those in. We do appreciate that obviously businesses have other ways to do that.
Okay, but just so we're clear, so your offering is actually a digital, a digital type literacy program of which data is part of, and you can make it, just focus on data if you wanted to.
It's a team skills and soft skills training program in which we train data fluency. So it focuses on that. So again, it's been able to adapt the coaching to what you need. And when we go into it, you'll see some of the challenges. There's some challenges that we could just talk about and some that we could ignore, depending on what the training outcome is that you want with the teams. The main focus for us is that digital fluency, or even data fluency, is not actually about, can you read a bar chart? Can you do A, B, and C? It's actually more about, have you got the confidence to ask questions about data? Have you got the awareness to think that there could be calibration and kind of cohesion between different data points? And have you got the actual story skills to talk with others about the data that you're seeing and how it compares to the data they're doing and what that means in order for a decision to make for the team? So it's all more around about creating confidence, awareness, and kind of trust in us actually being able to communicate and talk about and do all the soft skills around the data project. I think you can bring in technology, you can bring in really good data skilled people, and data projects are still failing across the industry. And it's because the failure of communication between business, data, and professionals around the business to be able to get to the right objectives. As I said, I'll come on to how the kind of coaching works and how it's focused purely on data in a moment on that basis. To give you that kind of example, what we do is we take that game-based learning. So we actually put people in immersive alternate world where they'll actually play a game, run through a simulation. That game actually simulates real world business scenarios and goes through a kind of role playing piece that we can engage and learn through. And then we combine that with the coached experience, which then takes lessons from elite performance teams, from data industry experts, and pulls that into lessons that the team can learn and develop and apply to their everyday thinking. It's that combination of those three that creates an impactful learning experience. I'm going to pause there for a moment and we're going to jump into the game itself. So this is our flagship game. It's called Sunk. We are developing, or we have developed, a number of other games, and there are various different modules and approaches throughout these. The games are designed with low poly, so they're purposefully very cartoon-esque. And that's because it helps your mind in focusing on the learning objective and not necessarily on the realism of the game. They are all very simple controls, essentially using the arrows to look around, using L to shine your light, and using E to interact with stuff. There is a training session at the beginning that people can run through on their own to help them, and there are also accessibility controls. But essentially, the game Sunk has 5 characters: the planner, the hacker, the technician, the acrobat, and the engineer. And these 5 characters each have their own background, they each have their own role, and they each have their own specialist activities. The very first chapter actually puts the 5 characters into a van where they are planning their heist. They essentially have to break into a building that is owned by this company called The Circle and disrupt the server farms where The Circle is stealing everyone's data and using it in metadata formats to manipulate the world. So each character has their own tablet of information here. So we can see here we have the mission profile.
Yeah, go on. Nick. So would it be 5 colleagues all playing at once and each picks a character? Yeah, okay.
Yeah, exactly. So we can scale up to over 2,000 colleagues at any one time, but each game session is played within 5 characters or 5 colleagues together. We tend to find that actually what's really good for our programs is to actually mix up teams and have different people playing, so that it improves that collaboration and communication, and also means that people learn through across different parts of learning with others, particularly if you've got a data professional in there and a non-data professional in there. It kind of has that osmosis learning as we go through as well. There are over 60 challenges in total, and it takes about 50 to 60 hours to play the whole game in total, but we break that up into 1.5-hour sessions where you play an hour's gameplay, half an hour coaching, and then we repeat that over the months as we go through. As coaches, we can jump people in between any part of the game in order to focus on certain skills and certain elements throughout the coaching experience.
Did you say 50 to 60 hours?
In total, yeah.
Okay. And how long would you typically, over what sort of time frame would you typically expect or see people doing this?
Yeah, it depends on the numbers of how you want to play it, but ultimately we tend to say that it works best with having one monthly session for each gameplay for as you move through the pieces, because then you're only taking 1.5 hours out of someone's kind of working month. It also means that a lot of what we're doing here, if you've got it, is you're changing behaviors, right? And you can't change that on a one-day course. Yes, I can teach you how to ask a question about data, but how do we install that into actually meaning that in your day-to-day you think about asking the data questions? That is a change of behavior. So doing it on a monthly basis encourages the awareness, encourages the confidence, and drives through the experience.
Okay, so if I'm doing my maths right,
over a couple of
that's
years.
over 3.5 to 4 years.
Well, you wouldn't have to play the whole 60 hours to complete everything, right? It's about challenge it and changing it. After, I mean, an esports team, after performing 2 days intense on the game, so after 16 hours, an esports team completed the whole thing in about 1.5 hours. But that was them playing consistently for 2 days, which obviously you would do on the thing basis. But it's about the simulations that they go through. Some teams have been able to do it quicker, but yeah, you're looking at a monthly course to drive that through over a 12 months basically.
So obviously it's finished talking through the game, but I think what I'd really like to talk about, if you're going to come to this, is what is the overall user experience, the user journey from the point someone says to me, I'm thinking about doing something in data literacy, through to completing. It'd be really good to get an overview as to what that whole journey might look like for a user.
Yeah, we can send over the lesson plans and the pieces from that. So yes, each of the 5 characters all have various different documents. So we're on the planner here, and we can see a hacked email, which is talking about some drones. We can see we've got, and this is where a field report here, which is talking about an upcoming event. We've got another field report here, which has got loads of data in it, which talks about some kind of observation and system patrols on that basis. But each of the 5 characters all have different documents. So if we open this one, we're on the technician here. So the technician's got a code cracker. It's got some testing results. There are charts and stuff that in there as well. I think this one's got, here we go. We've got a kind of project report here with some charts and tables. And the idea is that the team are given some planning time, and then after that planning time, they're then kind of pushed out to go and explore the world. So as we explore the world, we'll see when my internet wants to play ball. Probably because I'm screen sharing and on Teams, which is probably taking up all my machine power. But yeah, the actual from an internet perspective, we only need 4 kilobytes of internet speed, so it's accessible to all on that basis. And essentially we can, I've just twisted around the wrong way. You can run around, and the idea is that they escape into this building and go into the vault and pick up, and there'll be various challenges as they go along. I got here one of the challenges as an example is a code cracker, where what we tend to see is people do this. Now you can see here we've got some reds. I've got some yellows and actually 2 greens. So what we tend to find is as people start to do this, they don't actually pay attention to the color visualizations. There's lots of teams that ignore the color visualizations. They also start to do those kind of brute force 111, 222, 333. There's no kind of data logic through how they actually process the numbers and what they go through. And then also we don't see people writing down the numbers, storing the data, sharing the information with their colleagues. So we'll send, some people might get through the door and then someone else comes along and they end up getting caught by the drones, and they don't know how to get through the door. So all of that communication around the data and how they approach it and what they use are kind of points of conversation that we observe through the coaching piece. Other things we've got is we do have an AI. So if I put Adil, how do I win the game? Now, often we do see loads of people essentially try and interact with the AI and try and think that AI is going to give them all the answers. It purposely doesn't. It purposely guides them and directs them in the right direction. And that's, again, part of that coaching experience. When we talk about how do you interact with AI, the fact that it's there to scan information, to bring stuff back, and there's a real right to use it, when to use it and when not to use it, on that basis. From that perspective. So yeah, there's throughout the game a number of different challenges that relate to that. As I said, you saw some of the data there, you saw some of the drones, you saw some of the keypads, and also we've got the chat and AI piece. So there's a whole lesson planned through that. So the data skills, these are all the skills that we pull into the various different challenges. So overall, we talk about data curiosity, awareness, ethics, privacy management, and storytelling. And throughout those, we pull into how do you comprehend the data you're seeing, how do you apply it, how do you perform analysis, interpret data, and engage with others? And each of these different skill types links through to one of the challenges and stories in the actual game itself. So as we go through the challenges, we discuss it in the coach sessions. We look at, well, how, did you consider the colorization there? Who wrote down the data? When we come back and we failed and we tried the code again, did it change? So is there version control? What about how do we keep version controls of the data of the doors that we're going through, and stuff like that? So those feed into.
Nick,
examples.
Maddie has a quick question.
Yeah, sorry, go on, Maddie.
Sorry,
I didn't see the screen.
Sorry.
It's all right.
Do you go through the kind of syllabus? Does it force you through a syllabus in an order, or are there like kind of lots of modules that, depending on how you play the game, takes you? So it might take you to something on data privacy first and something on analytics, or does it follow always a pattern?
No, so it is dependent on, because it's an observed coached experience. Essentially what we're looking for is how the team are interactive and they're doing. So one of the examples we have is that, in almost 90% of everyone that's played it, that table that I showed you with all that data, everyone ignores that table. So the person who has that table doesn't ever tell anyone else in the team they have it. They don't talk about it. They just ignore that email. Now, if we see that behavior, then it's something we pick up on and we discuss in the coach session about, well, why did you think it was irrelevant? What do you think it could be? Why did you ignore it? So we use the coach sessions to focus the attentions on where the team need to have guidance and lessons. Each of those sessions are linked to various different challenges. So, for example, this challenge here for the keypads, this is where they all link through. We know as coaches which ones are linked, and therefore we know how to use them if that is an issue and a challenge. If we see people discussing it, talking about it, then there's no point using that lesson in that particular piece, and we can pick up on other lessons that come through. So it doesn't have to be linear, and it doesn't have to be you have to do A, B, and C in order to get to D. It's more about where the kind of pitfalls and the gaps in the team's knowledge, confidence, and awareness are that we adapt to. But we talk with you, we go through that with you on a planning process to say, well, actually, where do you want us to focus? And these are the observations we've seen, and we feed that back through team reports to say, okay, overall your team are really not doing well in A, B, and C. So we actually have if I click on here, all the teams are done for a scorecard.
Sorry, Nick, I'm just interrupting. Sorry.
Yeah,
is it the same 5 people month in the same
month
after month?
It doesn't have to be the same 5. You can switch them around, but we
just spend some time talking through what it actually is, because I'm slightly confused as well. So you get a group of people together.
Yeah.
It doesn't have to be the same. They sit in a room together or online and they play the game for an hour, and then someone's watching them. So it's an hour and a half session. In that hour and a half session, you'll come into it, you can virtually, and essentially you will be with 4 other colleagues that will be playing the game. For that particular session, you'll be given an objective for your 1 hour session play.
In the 1 hour session play, you'll go through and run the challenges that you're doing and try and achieve the objective. And throughout that, and at the end, we'll have a coached workshop essentially, where we'll talk about, what you experienced, what happened, what challenges you faced, where you were, and we'll use that to teach you various different lessons around data fluency control and how that improves your confidence and peace. Throughout those sessions, you will be asked to score the team, and the coach will score you as well on the five data fluency skills on a scale of 0 to 5. So you'll be scoring yourself. We'll use that as an aid to talk around it as well. Those scores are then managed up over time and essentially then can show the progress, but also show how different teams work well and not well together.
Okay, so each session then would be an hour playing the game virtually. Presumably they can talk to each other somehow through the game.
Yep.
And then immediately following it, half an hour coaching
Yes,
session where the person
coach session. So depending on the session in the game, it could sometimes we will, if the team are particularly struggling, we might stop the game at, let's say, 45 minutes and then go, okay, let's do 15 minutes coaching now. Let's go through, for example, one of the big challenges is managing masses of information and find out what data is relevant and what data is not. So we'll do some coaching around, well, actually, which data is relevant? How do we spot relevant data? How do we discuss data points we've got? And then we'll put the team back into it so they can apply what they've learned immediately into the game session. So it really depends on the how the team how we're observing the team to do that. But essentially, you've got an hour and a half session, and during that session, it's a mixture of coach lessons with the gameplay to apply and learn. And as I said, on that, we have had success in teams where they've just done a one-off away day and we've played this. Obviously, that doesn't change behaviours over long term, like I said, but certainly they've seen how they've not discussed and communicated about data and how data can actually help them in the objective they're trying to achieve on that basis.
Can I ask a question about demographics and who can kind of get on with the game well? Like, do you know what I mean? Like, I can just picture some colleagues, maybe this is not necessarily something that they would be used to doing, me included. Like, I've never really played computer games. Like, how does that work with different kind of generations and things?
Yeah, so that's something that we've always been focused on, and that's for one of the reasons why the controls are fairly very, very simple. I mean, I've got advanced controls on, hence why I was moving around with my screen with my mouse, but you can really literally just the arrow keys. Also, we provide a lot of stuff up front in terms of the training area. We've had quite a lot of people who have never gamed before that really loved the experience. And I think that Krista being one of them, yes. And I think part of, in fact, let's not speak on your behalf, Krista. What was it for you that captured you on it, and how did you feel going into it?
So personally, I hate gaming, and when this was first introduced to me, I was like, please don't make me actually play. And then I had to play within a group of 4 CDOs, and I was just like, I felt super intimidated. So it's like I don't gameplay, and I'm not a data professional, and this is the group that I'm playing in. And I think for me, the competitiveness in me kind of brought me out. And just to give you context, my children every single year say, instead of buying us a Christmas present, can you just do a day of gaming with us? And I'm like, no, not doing it. Throw money at the problem. Like, I don't want to do it. I just really engaged with trying to do the challenges in there. The controls are fairly intuitive and easy, but movement is probably my downfall within the process.
Sorry, go on.
I was going to say, one of the areas where we've actually had a lot of questions and challenge on diversity and stuff is actually about accessibility. So the game does have obviously a number of accessibility controls and elements in it. Obviously, it is a visual aid game, so the only thing we really can't deal with is full visual impairment. However, there's been a lot of people who said about diversity in terms of neurodiversity and learning. There's lots of text information, and this is where we actually use it to support in when it comes to data and when it comes to information and relevance. Is first of all, everyone gets the access to the data and information up front if they want to look at it and read it beforehand. So they do have the opportunity to be prepared for when they come into the actual sessions, and they do have their own time to read through it. But also that's a great use of AI. So often we tend to see that people try and use the AI to hack and say, oh, how do I do the keypad on the door? How do I, win the game? How do I do this? And often they don't think about, well, how can I use AI to summarize a document and help me decide whether it's relevant or not? So it's actually been a big aid in some of the like neurodivergent and kind of approaches of accessibility within teams and helping people support in how they achieve their objectives. But yeah, from a gamers, non-gamers perspective, we tend to find that most of the people that don't like gaming have found it quite fun in that sense, because it's quite simple to get on board with.
Yeah.
And
So
really,
Sorry, go on, Andrew.
No, sorry. So can I ask then? Sorry, how many? Before I ask, have you? This is fairly new, isn't it?
Yeah.
So have you? Do you have many customers? So because you might not be able to answer my questions if you don't. But is it widely used at the moment, or?
Yeah, so we've got we've had customers in local councils, we've had customers in insurance space, and although the data module pieces are quite new, so the data elements are fairly new, the game itself has actually been running for 7 years for leadership coaching and agile training. So there's really big, particularly over in France where the game was originally developed, you've got people like Le Mans that have done it for a number of years, SMB, stuff like that. So we've got a couple of good use cases on that basis.
So I can ask them. So my question is around actually, getting interest in it. So, when with our existing data literacy program, we have got this sort of like there are a group of people who are really interested in it, go on a data literacy course, know they want to go on it and really benefit from it. But the majority of people are either, people who think they're really data literate, and go on it and they're like, and don't engage with it because they think they should, or they want something a bit more interesting, and I can see how this sort of thing can really suit them, because it's a bit more interesting. They stay engaged in it and they learn what we want them to learn. But I would say the majority of people are actually people who aren't who do need to think about data literacy, but are a bit as you pointed out, a bit less confident and don't know how to start. And that's really the area that I think we need to probably focus on a bit more here at the Crown Estate. So do you find that, but I can't, going back to Maddie's point on demographics, I can't see those people willingly, it's hard enough at the moment, I can't see those sort of people willingly saying, oh yeah, I'm going to go play a game, for an hour a month. So do you find then that this works best if it's a mandatory, so is there something that we're saying you have to do, or do you find people willingly volunteer for it and sign up for it?
So I've got two customers that we've had this conversation a number of times with, and we've gone with two different approaches, right? So the first one, we've said the very first session we'll do physically and actually is mandatory. So the reason for that is we'll get a lot higher engagement. We'll actually be out there to support them with the first few stages of the controls. And it's a little bit unnerving when you first kind of get into it the first time, because you're a little bit like, I don't know what I'm doing. When we do that, it's, I purposely tell you, this is going to frustrate you. You're going to think, well, we don't know what we're doing. We haven't got all the information, but you have. So the very first one being physical and being mandatory, then gets the engagement to then do it virtually and drive things through people booking in. Now, the second piece is, if you then make it non-mandatory, the question becomes, well, are you getting the engagement? And actually the engagement is a metric of whether, one, it's successful, and two, whether those people are actually kind of eager to learn more about data and understand that data is important to the future of their roles. The other customer has said, let's make it non-mandatory and let's just go with it and see what kind of engagement we get. So it depends on how you feel it's through. I feel the physical first sessions is always a lot better to gain that traction, to gain that buy-in, then do it virtually. People then are bought into the challenge and the quest. And the more teams play this, Krista talked about the competitive element. We try not to make it competitive, you know. However, one of the customers we've done this within the day of us doing it with 4 different teams, the first thing they were talking about is who got further, you know, who got the furthest. Now, naturally, there are teams that got through furthest and teams that didn't. When you do it physically, there are different, not so much data elements, but other elements that come up. We had one team where all 5 of them were sat around one computer, focusing on one character to try and get to part of their objective. And so part of the observation as a coach was, you've already agreed as a team that half your objective is completely irrelevant because no one's working on it. So you're never going to achieve your objective. You know, there's things like that come up when you're physical, but we certainly get a lot more engagement to begin with if it's physical like that to start with, and then moves virtual.
Okay, so as an organisation, we're not in a position where we're able to make stuff that is mandatory at the moment. James is working on that, but
yeah,
you know, it's not. He wouldn't be in a position to be able to make something mandatory, so that's something we sort of have to bear in mind.
That makes sense. It's like I said, we've got customers that do it different ways depending on their own culture internally.
What I find really powerful with it is the platform is the facilitator. It's the coaching that comes with it. And when I interact with the game and when I've observed on location with clients, that's where you totally see the penny drop. So you're able to reflect on all of those experiences, and then in order to move forward and apply it, that is where the power is. So
yeah, we've only got a few minutes left. What I'd be interested in, if it's okay with you, spending some time talking about, because I can, you know, I've got a fair picture now of what the overall program would look like. Can you talk me through, you know, because I think there's possibly, you know, some value in running days, you know. So for instance, like we often have company offsite days, like we have a couple a year where events are run and stalls are put up, etc. So, you know, I can see some real value in, you know, doing something around data. And we talked a bit about it, you know, where people come along and they can, you know, come along and do some play a game or something like that, just to sort of get a bit of awareness. Do you run stuff like that? Could you talk me through what something that might look like?
So yeah, like I said, we've done it a lot on kind of what we call Explorer days, right? So that's either a half day or full day session. It can be used for icebreakers in corporate events, stuff like that. So we done actually one, not this Halloween, the Halloween before, I think it was Halloween before, with Westminster Council as an example. So we had 60 people from across their technology landscape doing a data strategy day. And the very first start of the data strategy day, we were physically split. We split them all into then obviously 12 teams, and they each had to run an hour and a half of the game to get to the first objective. With the view that it was obviously a bit competitive in the room, driving some pieces of how people got. But then we had an open coaching session around how people experienced what they found. And again, the thing that we try and drive is, in the very first challenge, you can get into the building without using any data that you're given. You could just naturally try and work it out, fail a few times and work it out on how to do it. The issue is that what people get frustrated by is they fail about 20 or 25 times before they succeed. Now, when they use the data they're given, they often would for them fail 0 times because they know what to expect. And when I talk about this in the coaching session, people often say, well, I didn't have enough time to go through all that data and understand what was relevant and analyze it all and do everything that you've done to do all that data. So then we talk about, well, what did they achieve in their hour? And no one achieved anything compared to what they would if they used the data. So we start to get the question of, well, why didn't you talk about that data? And often it's because people didn't understand what they were looking at. But if they just spoke to someone else in the team about what they were looking at, they would actually have the answer about what that data is for. Now, there are specific rules or kind of, let's say, traps in the first part of the game where 3 people have the same data set, but they're presented in different ways. One of them's like a month 5 report, one of them's a month 6 report, and one of them's like a non-governmental report. And therefore, we're talking about data validity, we're talking about data timeliness, we're talking about data accuracy really early on. And often you find the biggest talker in the room will talk about their data point without realizing that there's 2 other versions of it. So it's all these kind of lessons that we kind of purposely put into the very first part of the game, and we can pull them out, and they're not there to say you could have failed if you didn't use the data, because naturally we can make a business decision without data and still succeed. The point is how can data support us in our decision making? So it's not a mandatory, you have to use data, you have to do this. It's more about what benefits and advantages do we get through data, and that's normally the very first kind of lesson that we do in those kind of open away days. But we can do it physically, add a competitive element to it. We tend to, when we're doing it physically in one of those sessions, we tend to actually create a bit of theatrics around it. So, you know, we'll kind of turn it into there's an alarm and all of a sudden they've all got to do this kind of stuff and they've all got a certain time period to do it, just to keep the interactivity
That
up.
sounds good.
Have you,
Yeah.
have you ever,
Conscious of time,
yeah,
yeah.
I know we're almost out of time, but
Yeah,
have you ever run it for leadership event?
Yeah.
Like leadership?
So the as I said, the game originally was designed around leadership training. That I think, I don't know, I'll bring it back up, but one of the teams that was in that circle that I showed you the results was a leadership training with a leadership team. And quite interestingly, we had the CIO of an insurance business who we purposely didn't put in the planner role. We put her in one of the other roles, and she instantly took charge and went and said everything that she wanted, and they missed out really vital information. And it's that whole point of the planner's seen as in like the head of the team, but realistically they're not, and that's done purposely built as well. So yeah, it's interesting when you do it around the leadership team, where you put different people in the roles of how they perform. Obviously we've kept the leadership skills like kind of scoring separate and didn't reveal that to everyone, so for confidential reasons, but we can share that.
One of the things that I failed to mention at the beginning, I had also wanted to invite our L&D, head of L&D as well,
Yep.
and she wasn't available to make today's session, because to see how this kind of ties in with some other things. But yeah, I'm liking good thinking, Andrew. I'm liking this as an idea of kind of a away day type stuff for other, for, you know, every business unit in the company does them, and they're always thinking of
or even
fun, interesting, different things to do. And this,
so there's a few things. I know we've got a minute, but there's away days. But every year, we started this last year, we had like a whole company thing. I can't remember what it's called now, but everyone got together, something like that, yeah. But then the other thing as well that we did last year, this was before you were here, Maddie, and I think we might be looking to repeat, is with the ELC, the Enterprise Leadership Community. We went along to there, we played games with them, we set up our own games all around data. And so they might, and Caroline runs all of those, head of L&D. So I think that possibly something, and I think because of where we are as an organisation at the moment, I think rolling it out as a data literacy program right now will be a bit of a challenge, but certainly starting to think about, you know, how any opportunities to sort of weave us into away days.
Yeah, I appreciate we're at time, but on that, look, I think I'd say to everyone that we talk to, we're not here to do, as I said, do those PowerPoints, do those day classrooms and tick off at the end of the day to say, oh, you know how to read a chart, right? What we're talking about here is actually changing the way that we learners in organizations, looking at soft skills and looking at the future skills of making people more adaptable, more changeable to help them with whatever, you know, the world throws at us in business nowadays. And the focus of that is around data and AI. We appreciate that doesn't fit the model of a lot of L&D, a lot of kind of programs. Going to your boss and saying, I want to pay to play a game, it is a very difficult sell, right? We know that. So look, having one of those away days, having that kind of picturing it there, I think would be a great way to give some excitement to you, something actually show some of the leadership team how a different approach to learning and development can produce productivity and can help people with their confidence around talking about data. So I think it's a good starting point to work from.